The signal said 3 enemy carriers, and it gave a position 600 nautical miles east of Inubosaki, the cape that marks the eastern corner of the Kanto Plain. It went out on the morning of April 18, 1942, from a radio set bolted into a 90-ton fishing boat. She was called the Nitto Maru. She carried the number 23 painted on her, 11 men aboard her, and a small deck gun the Imperial Japanese Navy had fitted when it took her out of a fishing fleet and gave her a new job. The job was to sit at a fixed point on an empty grid of ocean and look east. There were dozens of boats like her. They were spaced along lines running 600 to 700 miles off the home islands. They existed because Japan had nothing else that could see that far. The Navy had no radar in service worth the name in April of 1942. The coast of Honshu faced 2,000 miles of open water in which an enemy could sit anywhere at all. So the combined fleet bought a Horizon the cheap way, requisitioning trawlers, putting a wireless operator aboard each one, and stringing them out in the cold water where the fishing had been good. The arrangement was designed around a single number, and the number was 200 miles. That was how close an American carrier had to come before its aircraft could reach Tokyo and get back to the ship afterward. Admiral Yamamoto's staff put the picket lines 3 times that far out, and the margin was the point. A force detected on the line still had the whole of that margin to cross before it could do anything at all, and every hour of the run belonged to the defenders. On the 18th of April, the system worked. The boats were where they were supposed to be. The enemy crossed the line where the line had been laid, and the report went in with an accurate position on it. Then a force of 2 carriers, 4 cruisers, and 8 destroyers went out of Japanese sight and stayed out of it, and no combination of aircraft, submarines, and warships put a second pair of eyes on it for the rest of the month. Nothing in the accessible record on either side closes that gap in a way that survives inspection. Task Force 16 had been picking up small surface craft on radar since 3 in the morning. Vice Admiral William Halsey avoided the first, avoided a second, and ran into a third at 7:38 in a heavy sea in daylight. The order to open fire did not leave the flagship until 7:52. The light cruiser Nashville then spent half an hour on a vessel displacing 90 tons, closing to rapid fire, working through 928 rounds of 6-inch, with Wildcat fighters off Enterprise emptying their magazines into the water alongside. The Nitto Maru went down at 23 minutes past 8. She hit a Dauntless dive bomber with machine gun fire on the way and put it into the sea, and 5 of her 11 men were pulled out of the water by the ship that had killed her. 6-inch guns are not built for that. The task force did not have to guess whether the contact report had gone out. Halsey carried his own radio intelligence detachment, and it heard the transmission leave the boat. What it heard was accurate. The position the Nitto Maru gave was within a few miles of where the Americans stood, which is a remarkable piece of work from a trawler's bridge in that sea. Her crew got the count wrong, reporting 3 carriers where there were 2, and they said nothing about the Army bombers lashed to the flight deck of one of them, which they had probably never come close enough to see. That left Halsey and Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle with an arithmetic problem and about 10 minutes to solve it. The plan had been to run in through the day and put the 16 B-25s into the air that evening, 400 miles out, close enough that the crews could bomb Tokyo and still reach the airfields waiting for them in Zhejiang province. Launching now meant launching in the morning about 10 hours early and a good 150 nautical miles further out than the plan allowed, with some accounts putting it 20 beyond that. Nobody aboard had to be told what that did to the fuel. Every crew had spent 3 weeks at Eglin Field learning to squeeze range out of the aircraft, and every navigator could do the subtraction in his head. They launched anyway. The alternative was to push 30,000 pounds of bomber over the side to clear the deck for Hornet's own fighters and then run for home with nothing to show. Doolittle's wheels left the deck at 8:20 in the morning. There were 467 feet of deck ahead of him. The bow was burying itself and coming up streaming, and no pilot in the group had ever taken a bomber off a ship before. They went at intervals of just under 4 minutes, and the last of the 16 was in the air an hour later. The navigator in the lead aircraft logged the launch position to the minute of arc. From the cape the picket boat had used as its reference point, it was 610 nautical miles. That figure is the whole of it. Nothing about April defeated the Japanese early warning system. It was answered from outside the range at which anybody had thought an answer was possible, by aircraft that had no business being on a flight deck. A B-25 is a land-based medium bomber with a wingspan of 67 feet and a combat radius that has nothing to do with carrier operations. No navy in the world held a doctrine for it, because no navy in the world had done it. The picket line where it stood was a correct design for the war, as it had been fought until that morning. The exact figure the Japanese staff was working to is one of the things that cannot now be pinned down, which is awkward, because the entire explanation rests on it. The Naval History and Heritage Command puts it at 200 miles. A serious account in the Naval Institute's own magazine puts it at 300 nautical miles. The Americans planning the raid worked to a third number again, since Captain Donald Duncan's feasibility study assumed Japanese patrol aircraft ranged out to about 300 miles, and the launch point came from that. No Japanese operational orders stating the planning radius has surfaced in English. 3 respectable sources, 3 numbers, and the mechanism of the most famous surprise of the war's opening year sitting on top of them. What Japan did with the contact it had is not in dispute, and it was not a small effort. The 26th Air Flotilla, an organization 17 days old, put 29 medium bombers into the air from Kisarazu carrying torpedoes, with 24 carrier fighters flying escort on long-range tanks, and 11 submarines from the 3rd and 8th submarine squadrons went out to the search areas along with 2 divisions of cruisers. Then the order went wider. The 1st Air Fleet, the carrier force that had opened the war at Pearl Harbor and had spent the 4 months since ranging from Rabaul to Ceylon without losing a ship, was told to turn round and hunt. The 1st Air Fleet was in the Bashi Channel between Formosa and Luzon, coming home from 4.5 months of continuous operations that had ended in the Indian Ocean. Akagi, Soryu, and Hiryu put their helms over and went east through the Luzon Strait at high speed. From the Bashi Channel to the point where Doolittle's aircraft left the deck is more than 2,000 statute miles. That is a week of steaming. At the far end of it was a force that had already turned for Hawaii and was making 25 knots in the opposite direction, which is the sort of gap no amount of urgency shortens. The bombers reached the coast a little after noon. Tokyo was in the middle of an air raid drill that morning, one of the unserious kind, with the wardens out and the sky empty. Several Japanese scout aircraft and ships saw the B-25s coming in low over the water and reported them as enemy bombers inbound, and they had it right. The reports were dismissed. Fighters already airborne saw them and did not engage, on the reasonable assumption that anything twin-engined and flying that low over the home islands belonged to somebody friendly. The full alert did not go out until about 15 minutes after the first bombs landed, and those were Doolittle's own incendiaries at 12:15. 13 of the 16 aircraft attacked targets in the Tokyo area, including Yokohama and the Navy Yard at Yokosuka, where a bomb hit the hull of Ryuho and put her completion back by months. The remaining 3 went south and broke up over Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe. Anti-aircraft fire was active and inaccurate and brought down several of Tokyo's own barrage balloons. Not one bomber was lost over Japan. A detection system reports what it sees. It does not get to choose what its own headquarters believes is possible. The search proper began after the raid rather than before it, and it ran for 6 days and nothing found anything. That is where the record stops being useful, and it stops in a way worth naming exactly, because 3 documents describe this morning and no 2 of them agree. Doolittle wrote in his classified report of June 1942 that the Japanese had been apparently entirely unprepared for the arrival, that the messages must have reached some message center, and that he could only presume poor dissemination of information or a complete failure of the enemy's communications. He was wrong on both guesses. In April of 1943, when the War Department told the public where the bombers had come from, the official account went further and said the picket boat's warning had never got through at all. That is untrue. The Japanese side of the warning survives in English through a staff study written in 1953 by former Japanese officers for the American occupation authorities. And that study is where the wording of the Nitto Maru's signal comes from. None of the 3 contains the thing everybody wants, which is the search plan, where those 53 aircraft went on the 18th, on what bearings, out to what distance, and whether anyone in the room proposed looking beyond the assumed radius. That paper has not surfaced. Until it does, the honest limit is that a correct report was fed into an organization which had already settled where the enemy was permitted to be. The American report is in the National Archives. The press account of 1943 is in every newspaper morgue in the country. The Japanese staff study sat in an Army translation series and has been read since by almost nobody. 2 of those 3 are easy to find. Subscribers get the 3rd one. The decision that put the carrier out of reach for good was the same decision that finished the aircraft. 10 hours and 150 miles is the difference between a night landing on a lit field in Chekiang and 15 aeroplanes going into the ground and the sea in the dark. What saved the crews from a worse arithmetic still was weather. Nobody had counted on a tailwind of about 25 knots that held for 7 hours after they came off the target and gave them something like 250 extra miles. Without it, they would have gone into the water 200 miles short of China. With it, every aircraft reached the coast, and every aircraft finished the night wrecked, and 80 men came down in bad weather over country none of them knew. 3 died doing it, and the Japanese took 8 more prisoner. Nobody lit the fields in Chekiang because Chungking had the news and Chucho did not. 3 things sit in the reports the survivors wrote afterwards in Chungking. The gunners complained that the sight on the upper turret collected dust and moisture and could not be cleaned without stripping the whole unit, and they put the loss of effectiveness at 60%. Staff Sergeant Edwin Horton, who wrote that complaint up, closed it by certifying that he had trained on powered turrets at the Bendick School in South Bend, Indiana, and was qualified to judge. Major John Hilger's crew, coming off Nagoya, reported that the Japanese cities were drab and gray and much the same to look at, and that the charts were misleading because the contour interval was too coarse to show the hills that pushed them up to 1,000 feet on the run-in. Doolittle's report closes with a short list of lessons, and the 3rd is the one that repays reading, that the United States should make efficient use of small surface craft, fishing boats fitted with a simple radio and a simple code, stationed offshore to report the type, position, course, speed, and altitude of any enemy force approaching the coast. The man whose mission a picket boat had almost ruined came home and told Washington to go and build one. The Japanese search was discontinued on the April 24th. Akagi, Soryu, and Hiryu had already given it up and anchored at Hashirajima on the 22nd. The picket line had lost about 5 boats sunk and a good many more shot up, and the Navy made fresh requisitions and sent the replacements out to the same stations. Hornet came alongside at Pearl Harbor on the 30th. Most of the men who had flown off her were still walking west across China when she got there.